In June 2025, the world watched two of the Middle East's most formidable rivals, Israel and Iran, lock horns in a high-stakes military conflict. But what most people saw was just surface level: missiles, drones, explosions. What they missed was the mind game underneath, the psychological chess match. Because real war isn't just about firepower, it's about fear. It's about control. It's about breaking the enemy from within. So let's unpack how Israel applied centuries-old psychological strategies in a 21st century war, and how you can use the same principles in your business, relationships, and even personal growth. Chapter 1. Know your enemy better than they know themselves. Clausewitz once said, "War is the continuation of politics by other means." But modern war? It's also psychology by other means. Israel's first move wasn't a missile, it was information. For years they embedded intelligence teams inside Iran, mapping not just physical infrastructure, but emotional weak spots, leadership patterns, retaliation behaviors, nationalist triggers. They didn't just guess how Iran might react, they knew. This is the difference between reactive power and predictive dominance. And it's a psychological principle too. The person who understands their opponent's mental model, how they process threats, honor, and fear, always has the upper hand. Chapter 2. Control the narrative. While Israel hit Iran's air bases, they also hit something just as crucial: global perception. The Israeli government released tight, calculated statements: calm, confident, measured. Iran, on the other hand, unleashed a flurry of contradictory reports. Some called for revenge, others blamed the West, others denied damage. Guess who looked like they were in control? In warfare, and in life, confidence is contagious. So is panic. By dominating the narrative, Israel shaped not just global opinion, but Iran's self-perception. The story you tell becomes the reality you live in. Takeaway: master the narrative early. In negotiations and crises and conflict, whoever frames the story first usually wins. Chapter 3. Hit the ego, not just the equipment. Israel's strikes weren't random, they were surgical and symbolic. They targeted not just equipment but identity: scientists, generals, command posts. One of the biggest psychological hits? The assassination of IRGC Commander Hossein Salami and top nuclear researchers. That's not just an operational loss, that's an ego implosion. Iran's message of invincibility, gone. This is psychological warfare 101. Remove not just a person, but what that person represents. The mind recoils harder from humiliation than pain. Ask any therapist. In your world, whether in leadership or conflict, target symbolic power. Undermine status, not just arguments. That's what creates a psychological collapse. Chapter 4. Leave the opponent a way out. Now here's where it gets interesting. Despite Israel's overwhelming success, they didn't bomb Iran into oblivion. Why? Because smart war isn't about maximum destruction. It's about calculated dominance. Israel intentionally left space for Iran to retreat, to save face, to negotiate. This is a crucial psychological rule. When people feel cornered, they lash out. When they feel respected, they compromise. Even in warfare, ego is currency. Preserve a bit of your opponent's dignity, and you keep them rational. In life, this means never pushing someone so far that they feel like they've got nothing to lose. Always leave a path for dignity. Chapter 5. Use surprise. Like a sledgehammer, Israel's Operation Rising Lion was a shock-and-awe masterclass. Over 200 aircraft, 330 targets, all hit within hours. But the real brilliance? Mossad agents inside Iran took out radar systems before the airstrikes even began. Iran never saw it coming. And when the brain doesn't expect pain, it panics. Psychologically, surprise doesn't just cause fear, it causes disorientation, confusion, freeze response. That's when people make mistakes. That's when they break. Whether you're negotiating, debating, or leading, use timing, silence, and novelty to throw your opponent off rhythm. The moment they stop predicting is the moment they start losing. Chapter 6. Turning Victimhood into Power. When the airstrikes faded, Iran didn't just lick its wounds, it lit a narrative wildfire. In the court of global opinion, Iran shifted roles, from feared state to wounded nation under attack, and in a polarized world, this framing worked. Images of bombed-out buildings in Tehran flooded international media. Pro-Iran protests erupted in cities like Beirut, Baghdad, and even London. Hashtags like Father Stop the Aggression and Iran Under Attack began trending. This is psychological Aikido, using the opponent's force against them. Israel's powerful strikes became emotional fuel for Iran's story of victimhood and resistance. And in many Middle Eastern cultures, victimhood isn't weakness, it's proof of faith. It's a badge of moral high ground. In martyrdom cultures, being attacked can legitimize your cause. Iran tapped into global resentment toward the West, reminding allies and adversaries alike. This isn't just about missiles. It's about identity, sovereignty, and imperial memory. Chapter 7. Proxy Pain. Strategy. Iran didn't need to launch a single missile from its own soil, because its retaliation plan was already loaded in other people's hands. Enter the proxies: Hezbollah in Lebanon, Houthis in Yemen, militias in Iraq and Syria, all strategically armed, all emotionally primed. Within 72 hours, over 400 rockets had been fired at Israeli cities, not by Iran, but in Iran's name. The goal wasn't to defeat Israel militarily. It was to overwhelm Israel psychologically. Imagine being Israel's command. You've just won a major operation, and suddenly you're surrounded. Missiles from the north, drones from the south, uncertainty from the east. This is asymmetric warfare at its most psychological. Iran created an illusion of omnipresence, that no matter where you strike, retaliation could come from anywhere. The cost? Iran's hands stayed relatively clean on the surface. The pressure was externalized. But the pain? It felt internal. And that's how you mentally wear down a superpower, by making them feel under siege from ghosts. Chapter 8. Psychological Endurance. Iran's final psychological weapon wasn't a drone or a rocket. It was endurance. The ability to absorb pain without breaking. Because where Israel struck with speed, Iran countered with symbolism. Where Israel used silence and strategy, Iran used emotion and mythology. From Ayatollah speeches to social media videos, Iran framed every loss as sacred. Martyrs weren't casualties, they were champions. Setbacks weren't defeats, they were part of divine destiny. This is deep-rooted psychological warfare, played over centuries. Iran reminded its people, and the world, of its 2,500-year-old civilization. It painted Israel's power as temporary, but its own resistance as eternal. Propaganda became spiritual armor, music, poetry, religion, all fused into one message: we will outlast you. And in the psychology of war, survival is a statement. If your enemy hits you with everything, and you're still standing, that alone becomes a win. Iran didn't just fight a war, it absorbed one. And that's a psychological victory in its own right. The Israel-Iran conflict of 2025 wasn't just a war of missiles, it was a war of minds. Every move, planned through the lens of fear, ego, pride, and perception. And whether you're in business, politics, or personal life, these psychological strategies apply. Outsmart before you outfight. Influence before you interrupt. Lead minds before you lead armies. Because wars will evolve, but the brain remains the battlefield. Liked this breakdown? Hit subscribe and dive deeper into real-world psychology behind history, power, and influence. This is not just war analysis. This is mindset mastery. Welcome to the battlefield of the mind.